And now together, I'm going to invite Danny Dungyov from Figmeister or Figmeister, depending on where you're describing it in Germany or in Bulgaria or wherever. The stage will be yours to give us more about designing a data visualization. Danny, enjoy.
Thank you for having me. Hey everyone, how are you doing? I hope you're having a good time so far in the conference. So, yeah, does this work? Yep. All right. So, before we start, a quick question. Have you ever said yes to a project just to later realize that you may have just ruined your life? Well, yep, that was me. Today I'll share a story about building product analytics tool. That's a tool I call data visualization engine, and you're gonna see why in a bit. But most importantly, that's a tool for product managers, marketeers, and UX designer, helping them understand how their users are using their app. And building this tool was actually an opportunity to fail. I will share some stuff about UX, but most importantly, I will share a story of how I felt as a decision maker, as a leader, and as a team member. Because why do we fall? So we can learn to get ourselves up. And this is not a polished success story. From one hand, it will be something like a case study. On the other hand, a story of wins, of failures, of ego versus reality, of a lot of trade-offs, and to be honest, one of the most complex UX challenges I've been working on in my career. Oops, that's the next one. So, chapter 1, the assignment. It is early October, close to the end of the year, when the budgeting season approaching. It is when usually a company decides what they will spend money on the next year as a strategy. One day, I just finished a one-on-one with one of my designers, and one of the PMs that I was working with came to me and said, "Hey, Danny, the leadership are inviting us for an important meeting. Let's go." So we went, and they said, "Here's the thing, guys. You know our analytics module. It's 12 years old, a legacy system with a lot of problems, but it's important for our business, and customers are complaining. However, we haven't really touched it since. So you two now have the mission to propose a vision, and you have 1 month, and it better be good." I thought, all right, that's an opportunity to prove myself, right? But then my inner voice said, what did you just get yourself into? Okay, I'll be honest, I panicked. I remember I chain smoked 1 or 2 cigarettes, maybe 3 in a row. I have my bad habits, yeah. But then we sat down with my PM and we brainstormed. What can we do? We have a month. There's nothing much you could do. So we decided a couple of things that we can approach, and we split some tasks. He started doing some competitive analysis and dived into the existing business metrics, while in the meantime, I started reaching to some customers, doing some customer interviews to understand their pain points and their needs. And in the meantime, while I was waiting for a meeting to be accepted, I was playing with the leading product analytics tools out there. And yeah, at some point, well, we had some insights on what's going on. I won't dive into the specifics, but on a summary, well, the current UX was frustrating. People were complaining from it. It was hard to navigate. There were a lot of performance issues, which obviously hurt the UX, and there were many hard-coded secrets. This led to basically having some customers that hire another products like Amplitude and Mixpanel, who are the leading product analytics platform, because they simply couldn't get the job done with what they were trying to achieve with our tool. And in our lens, that was actually an opportunity. Why? Well, because the customers are paying for 2 tools for 1 job to be done. That meant if we fix this product, well, there's an opportunity for us to cut our customers' costs and eventually get part of it as an upsell. And last but not least, well, every year our company was spending resources to support something that wasn't working. And we did it on time. Yeah, for 4 weeks. And trust me, that was a lot of work. You know how user interviews are going. But how to sell that opportunity to your stakeholders? That's a challenge on its own. And I said, okay, let's try something new. At the same time, there are more than 10 pairs of PMs in designing doing the same as we do because the budget seasoning is approaching. So I said, have you heard about Amazon's working backwards method? By the way, for those who haven't, 13 years ago, Ian McAllister, who was VP of Amazon at that time, shared and answered this question at Quora. So you can Google it. It's super interesting. And my PM liked the idea and said, okay, let's try something new. It will be interesting. And the core deliverable of this approach is actually the press release document. That is basically what you can how you imagine what you will post when you're announcing the product. And when you usually announce something in a PR, well, you're doing sales. So you want to sell the value. You want to share the value, what it does to the customer. So it basically makes it customer-centric. So we did one. We write one down. And on top of that, what we changed and decided to add as a plus was that I created a very high-level demo, a mock-up, a prototype basically, of how the product may work from the lens of the customer, basically with exact use cases and those value-bringing moments. In the meantime, my PM did the most PM-ish thing, which was making a presentation with the competitive analysis, with the business impact, a projected revenue, and our ask. Our ask was basically what budget do we want? What big of a team we need in order to complete that in the next 1 or 2 years. And then we invited the leadership to a meeting, presented all that, and the moment in this meeting when the if question stopped, and the questions who were, how much people do you need to make this happen, I knew we won the room. Even through Zoom, I could see the spark in their eyes. And I said, we've won, right? Right? There is always one but in those situations. We said that in order to complete this vision, we would need 3 cross-functional teams to make it happen realistically for 2 years. And they said, cool, but you're going to need to follow the same timeline, but just with 1 team. Before we invest a lot of money in that, we must see the value. So within this first year of developing that, you better put something in the hands of our customers to test the hypothesis. And this is where the fun started. So chapter 2, foundations. How do you build something with the quality of a product, or the product company that has hundreds of developers building just that with a team of 7? Let's see. The reality punched us down. Because, yeah, at least they agreed that we won't support anymore the existing product so we can completely focus on revamping this thing. But we were 7 people. It was a very complex domain. We had to lay the foundation for both UX and software architecture. The scale of the project was really insane. It was super complex domain, very technical, no established standards for how those data visualizations should be comprehended by the users. We had dependencies with other parts of the product. The design system felt like it's constraining us, and many, many other stuff that we needed to think about. So the bigger picture was, well, a humongous picture. And what this meant for me was that actually I had to be an individual contributor for this project. But in the same time, I was responsible for my design team, and I was leading 3 other parts in the product at the same time. So what could go wrong? Everything. But before I tell you about the battles that we had to fight, first, I want to give you a glance of how the interface looks like, so we can dive into some specifics, otherwise the story won't hit with the same weight. And at the end of the day, we're at the UX conference, right? So let's take a look at some screens. This is what the interface looked like in its private beta release. And I call this a data visualization engine. Why? Well, you simply can get your data visualized in any way you want. For a simple example, imagine you're an e-commerce business and you want to understand how often your users are viewing a product and compare that to the purchases. But from here, the use cases are going deeper and deeper. In essence, it is what data you want, like for example, product viewed and purchases. And then how you want to slice it. You, for example, want to may view it by different country. All right. And then how you want to view this data. So on the left side, you can see, which is basically a query builder. For those who doesn't know, a query is how through interface you're asking for information from the database with certain criteria. On the right side, after you hit this blue button, which I will come back in a bit, you get a chart and a table. But there are many sub-features coming with this. For example, you want to select the date range that you want to explore, which is the whole timeline. Or you may decide that you want to compare this with the previous period. You can change the breakdown, whether it's daily, or it's monthly, or weekly, and so on and so forth, and many other features. The table below basically controls the chart and visualize everything that can't go there. But also, you may want to decide that you don't want to view that in a line chart. You may go with a bar chart. By the way, this pattern represents that this is compared with the previous year. And I don't know if you saw, but the equations in the table below changed as well. Because previously, well, that's a timeline, the data based on every data point in this screen. And now, it's an accumulation of the whole period. So it's a different equation, different metrics, a lot of mathematics. You could also decide to go with a pie chart. For some people, it's easier, you have use cases. And yeah, for the design system geeks here, those are responsible components that are reusable for both designers and developers. Or you can visualize it in a simple absolute value, which is something that I call a metric tile. Basically, many states, many variations, and a lot of flexibility. And you can see, you can imagine, I hope so, that's not a simple task to solve. So, with technical features like that, yeah, it won't be used by juniors, for sure. However, analysis paralysis and information overload in this complex composition is something, a human bias that you should think about. And most importantly, I want to give you another perspective, which usually we as UX designers tend to forget sometimes, not always, but sometimes. It's the technical aspect. Because every split of this data actually means that you're going to multiply the data and what you search from the database, for example, 100x. But what if you have two splits? That means you're going to multiply 100 by 100, which are 10,000 results. And then you end up with performance being hurt. And imagine, one of our customers was the biggest e-commerce in India, serving more than 1 billion customers. The data was humongous. So the wait time drastically reduced. And how do you solve that for the user if they have to wait for 30 seconds or in worst cases, minutes? Well, what we did is thinking about the perception, how you can make the user wait. Well, with such delighters like this CSS animation that is going to begin right now. Yeah, it's playing, kinda. It's more smooth in the real life. But that's not actually the real problem. The real problem here is the cost. Because making the user wait is one thing, but paying what you have, I heard that there are some developers out here, you know how much AWS may charge you. So imagine it's one thing to search for one result in a database, another for 100, another for 10,000, and so on and so forth. So many things, and this interface was just 1 out of 7 modules in our roadmap. So now that you have the lens of what we were building, let's talk about the battles that came with designing such a feature. This is the digital embodiment of compromise. As I said, this blue button right here, and I'll tell you why. Every time I saw it, it stared at me and said, "So you gave up, huh?" Well, simply because most of the product analytics platform works by focus out, which means whenever you change something, it automatically populates the chart. But that comes with a hidden cost. What if you, we're building a pilot product here. And you don't want here and there to fire expensive queries to the backend, because you may end up having a feature that reduces your returns and actually accumulates more costs. So it's a trade-off. And this trade-off came to other problems, like what if the user forgets to click the button after they change something? The chart you won't get a new chart. You have to always click that button. And it's awful. As a UX designer, this hurts. But I needed to understand that there are other aspects, and they're important. And sometimes UX should not be at any cost. Through this project, for those 2 years when we were working on it, we had to constantly make decisions on, are we going to make it now easier for the user and risk our team to miss the deadline and receive pressure from the leader? So it's a trade-off. But also another complexity, not complexity, but just a tough thing for me was never in my career before I had to think about the mathematics, because I needed to provide the exact formulas and measurements on how to basically equate those metrics and visualize them in the way that they mattered for the user. That was a requirement, basically. Otherwise, how are you going to build this product? And trust me, in high school, I didn't have the best grades on math. So I'm super grateful to my developers, because I was basically receiving free private math lessons in order to do that. Because, yeah, developers are great at math. If you have something that you need to be solved, go to them. Anyway, sorry. The other biggest thing, a biggest decision through the time for every different module was flexibility or standardization. It's basically, do you want to make something already set up that comes out of the box to the user, or you want to give them flexibility to do whatever they want? In our case, they were power users. Not everyone was power, but they were technical users. They weren't juniors. So flexibility was, most of the cases, the choice and the requirement from our customers. That meant that when you give flexibility, you need to set limitations. Otherwise, you're exposing your system to exploits, and then this may lead to costs. But not just costs, also to how your users are going to comprehend that. There's a term that I love to use, and I call it a spaghetti chart. Why? Well, how are you going? If you let the user come to that, they won't understand a thing from it. I mean, look how it looks like. But there are also other limits from another perspective. Here, we can consider accessibility. I mean, a person, probably most of you see probably all of the covers, and you probably have a hard time understanding this. Imagine a person who doesn't see all of the fullest cover palette. How are they going to understand that? So what we've taken as a decision is first to implement a pattern library that comes on top of the cover palette, and to limit the number of covers you can put on the chart, because it's not understandable. And these are those types of limits that are decisions, because you're giving flexibility, but how do you protect the users from themselves? Everything that couldn't go in the chart because of those limits needed a solution, and this is where the tables comes in. The table basically has everything that you can't visualize in the chart of the limits that you have just set, right? So you need another solution. This is why we decided that, okay, everything then goes in the table, right? This is why the table it is, to put everything there. But you have another problem. What happens when you render a lot of things in the front end? Well, your browser may crash. So you need another limit, another solution. This is why we decided that we're going to put 200 results on that table. That was, when we did some measurements, the middle ground, which was working pretty well. So what we did is you receive 199 results on this table, plus one, which we call others, which is the accumulation of everything else in the database. And if for some reason the user scrolls to the bottom of this table, well, you show up such a dialog which says, hey, that's the limit we can show you. If you want more data, well, download it via CSV. But those small details are actually super important for the UX, those details. Why? Well, how would you think that if you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to get a very friendly message saying how to proceed further? Or something small, I don't know if you have noticed, but there's a 1000 separator. This is super small, but it makes it better and readable. Because when you work with millions, well, it's easier just to have a little space there. And when you can, please round up those numbers. They're way easier to comprehend. But as I said, often we had to take decisions because of those limits, and sometimes it hurted the UX. And this hurts as a UX designer, but it's the reality we live in and how we make trade-offs. Basically, a lot of trade-offs. And you can see for how much things we needed to think about. It's a very technical feature. But even now, I can't forget the moment when the thing, after 6 months of work, came to life. This is not playing. I don't know if I refresh it, it will play. Yeah, that was basically the first time when the front end and the back end were connected, and you could see the thing, you could touch it, because sometimes designing in Figma, the UX looks great, but until you touch that thing, you cannot be sure that the UX is pleasant. And it was a champagne-deserving moment, as we did with my team. And from there, every white hair on my head was worth it. Because we did an MVP beta program with more than 10,000 users, and we received adoption. That's great, actually a great adoption. In the first 4 weeks, 50% of our customers in the beta program started using this thing. And 60% of them actually started using it on a daily basis. And from day one, they were using it like power users. Like they didn't need any guidance or stuff. It was just intuitive for them, which was, I was super grateful because I wasn't sure. There was no time to test it out. You just had to make it because, well, there were many stuff to think about. And actually, the time to task when we measure it, that took another 3 months, but yeah, was reduced from 10 minutes to 2 minutes, which is insane. Yeah, and by the way, those 60% were 10 more people than the daily retention before. So great metrics. It felt like there's a light in the tunnel of this vision becoming a reality, until it didn't. The hardest battles weren't with the data or taking UX decisions. They were with myself as a leader at that time. In one of the quarterly business review meetings, we showed the data and everything. The leadership were happy and said, all right, now we can expand your team. You're bringing value to our customers. And that was great, right? That was super great. This is what we hoped for. Now we can increase the velocity. And as a leader, also I understand that I'm here to serve my team and provide great and exciting opportunities to my designers so they can be motivated. And this is why I decided that I will start onboarding one of my junior designers to this project, to mentor him, to work hand by hand, and eventually have a successor that at some point, well, in the meantime, helping me design, but eventually at some point to own the project, to race, and so I could have time to focus on other important parts of our product. But this didn't went as planned. There were more developers to serve now. And the design that they required was doubled. So we need to produce more designs with the same velocity we had before. Unfortunately, the junior struggled because he had a long ramp time. Ramp time is the time when that you're being onboarded and start contributing actively. Developers started comparing my speed with his speed, which is not fair, but humanly understandable. And this led to many problems because delayed designs led to delayed developments, which led to delayed releases, which led to pressure from the board. The result was that in this first quarter where we were working with another designer, which had to make things better, right, actually wasn't. The people in our team started losing motivation. They were panicked. Some of them, I believe, they were close to a burnout. And this was because of me, because of my poor decisions, right? Because I wanted to grow the team from the UX side as well. I guess I had good intentions, but that was not enough. And I decided that at the end of the quarter, what I could do, I decided to swap the junior with a senior designer. Big mistake. That meant more onboarding and more delay. And the team was tired. They were frustrated, questioning me. And that hurts, to be honest. Instead of speeding up, velocity went down for 2 quarters, which caused many headaches I cannot describe because of my poor leadership. That's it. That's the reality. I guess I chose the long term. That was where my vision was. But I didn't shield my team enough at that time in the short term. And that's on me. I completely understand my mistake and I take complete ownership of it, the full responsibility, because it's important to take these responsibilities. And in this case, leadership was about choosing who absorbs the pain, the product later or your people now. Lesson learned. Looking back, I would still invest in people. But I will make sure that I'm going to pick the right moment and the right talent for it. And don't rush to make things just because there was an opportunity. Because this may cause a lot of problems to other people as well. And as a leader, we're responsible for that. All of us were transformed. I'm super grateful for the team. Even the headaches that I caused, they stayed strong to me. They stayed behind me. They, gave me that constructive feedback that smashed my ego and even stepped on it. But that's an important lesson also, because you should never let your ego on anything you do. It only brings you back. So all of us were transformed. The team, the me, and also the business. Because the higher you grow in your career, the less you work with pixels, and the more it's about quality, courage, and people. Super important people. I learned how to choose my battles, when to compromise, and when to defend the user at all costs, and when you must step up and defend something, and when you must nod your head and comply, because these are the circumstances. I improved, I guess, at least I hope so, my expertise as being a designer of people, of systems, and long-term outcomes, and also consequences. We struggled together as a team, but that created trust and strength. It transformed our craftsmanship in a way that actually we become an example internally. And we didn't become a great team because things were easy, quite the opposite. But at the end of the day, all those ups and downs through this journey opened a lot of doors for our business. It helped us close major deals. It retained customers, reduced churn, which is great, right? That's the best thing you could hope as a product person. It proved that we could play in the arena of the big product analytics products. But the world doesn't stop evolving, because at that time, suddenly, AI knocked on our door and completely changed the game. If you remember, there was a quote that we identified, or maybe I skipped that. Anyway, through my user interviews, I identified the core user need, which was, show me what I don't know about my product. And now, with AI, it transformed to, let me spend less time finding what I don't know and more time acting on it. People didn't want anymore to dive into data and spend all the time looking at those numbers. They wanted the answers right away. And this is how the product cycle never ends. It adapts, it improves, and it evolves. Do you remember the press release that I've mentioned in the beginning? Before even a single line of code was written down, we built the product that lived to tell the story we dared to. It won't happen always the way it did with us, for sure. Some visions won't even go through. We're going to fail a lot. But I'm so grateful. We're talking here about 2 years of hard work of a lot of people. And I can share one simple principle for all of you designers. Design is not a decoration. It is the discipline of making quality out of chaos. And you heard my story, from taking initiative to sitting on my butt and working it out. From failing hard because of good intentions, no path is straightforward. Because we should seek to fail, to learn how to admit, because failure is not a weakness, but an instrument to grow. And I have a challenge to you. In the next 30 days, take responsibility for something nobody asked you for. Lead a problem, shape a vision, drive a change, and don't wait for a permission to do that. And that's why I started Figmeister. Not as a business, but as an ecosystem to help designers as you grow. And this is why at least half of the speakers today are building something with us. And if this story resonated with you, I'd love, if you're on your own journey of becoming not just designer, but leading stuff, let's say, I'd love to stay connected. Because let's design better products, but most importantly, let's design better designers. Thank you.